In the headlines, a two-day early voting for the June 4th local elections begins on Friday. The Election Commission expects a higher voter turnout this time around. An April data point for the Korean economy that takes a hit from the ferry disaster. How long will its impact last? We get one view. And Seoul and Washington react to Thursday's announcement of the Japan-North Korea deal on their abduction case, but it's more like a wait-and-see approach for now.
Hello and welcome. This is Primetime News, and I'm Sean Lim.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I am Kang Tae-ri in Seoul. Although Election Day is just still a few days off, Koreans headed to the polls on this Friday. For the very first time in Korean local election history, early voting is an option. And we have the day's voter turnout, which stands at 4.75%. Kim Young-gil has more on how officials believe this new system will get more people to exercise their votes.
For the first time in Korea's local election history, a two-day long early voting period started this Friday. Without prior registration, voters can cast their ballots from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Korea time if they are unable to make it on Election Day, June 4th.
I won't be able to vote on the actual day of the election, so I think this early voting system is very convenient.
Voters are only required to show their resident registration card to cast their ballot at any of the more than 3,500 polling stations set up across the nation.
I think the early voting system is great, as it does not require prior registration. And since the polling booth was nearby our workplace, we were able to vote during our lunch hour.
Electronic devices located in every polling booth recognize the barcode on the ID cards and take the fingerprints of voters. But some voters complained of problems.
It was not easy finding our way to the polling booth. I think we need more signs to guide voters.
For added convenience, smartphone users can download an application that provides information on the locations of nationwide polling stations and the list of candidates in the local elections. Officials from Korea's National Election Commission have been dispatched to each polling station to manage and monitor the voting process. Through the early voting system, the National Election Commission expects the voter turnout this year to be higher than it was in the previous local election in 2010. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe urged allies in the region to counter the rise of China while promoting a greater role for Tokyo in security matters. In his keynote speech made during the last hour at the Asian Security Summit kicking off today, he also urged China to come to the negotiating table instead of exchanging fighter jets and flexing its military power in the region. The Chinese delegation, led by Vice Foreign Minister Fu Ying, is expected to make his speech at the forum this weekend as well. Citing the heightened tensions in the South China Sea and East China Sea, Abe's top government spokesman had said the speech would make the case for, quote-unquote, constructive discussions towards peace and safety.
Japan's recent agreement to ease its sanctions on the North for reinvestigating Japanese abductions has caused alarm in the international community, but it's mainly taking a wait-and-see approach to the deal for now. Our Shin Se-min has more.
Japan's deal with Pyongyang has touched off concerns that Tokyo's unilateral lifting of sanctions against North Korea could cripple joint international efforts to halt the North nuclear development. The Korean media is citing an unnamed South Korean government official as saying that the move could have a negative impact on denuclearizing the North. The U.S. has refrained from making direct comment on the possible impact of the deal while stressing the need for clarity in talks with North Korea.
We continue to support Japanese efforts to resolve the abductions issue in a transparent manner.
Experts are hesitant to jump into any conclusions on the possible impact of the deal, as Pyongyang has a track record of backing out of its commitments. As for how the deal will affect ties between South Korea, Japan, and the U.S.,
I don't actually think it will impact the relationship that much, in part because we have to wait and see if the North Koreans are actually going to do anything, right? I mean, the North Koreans have said in the past that they would work on this issue, and they have not.
Political observers say at least a couple of months are needed to determine how the deal pans out. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
U.S. lawmakers are in the process of turning the screws on Pyongyang even tighter than they are now. A subcommittee within the House of Representatives unanimously passed a bill on Thursday that would strengthen existing sanctions on North Korea with the goal of preventing the North from further developing its nuclear and missile weapons programs. The bill says the State Department should draw up a blacklist of North Korean officials who are perpetrators of human rights violations. It also suggests the president consider labeling the North as a nation that launders money, a clause which expands sanctions to third parties that do business with North Korea was not included.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Che-ri from the heart of Seoul.
Begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Last month's ferry disaster is casting a dark cloud over Korea's still weak economic recovery. Newly released figures for April show the effect is being felt all across the industries here in the country, but experts say the impact isn't likely to last long. Hwang Ji-hye reports.
The sunken Sewol-ho ferry disaster threatens to wreck Korea's fragile economic recovery. Statistics Korea said Friday that output across all industries dropped 0.5% in April from a month ago. The agency said the drop is largely being seen in the service industry, which includes the leisure and lodging sector, reflecting lackluster domestic demand brought on by the disaster. But many say the trend won't last so long.
The moderate pace of economic growth comes from the sluggish domestic demand, which is not keeping up with the pace of strong exports. On that trend, I believe the ferry disaster added negative pressure temporarily.
In fact, the nation's industrial output, which is less affected by the ferry disaster, grew 0.1% in April from a month earlier, marking 2 straight months of expansion. Facilities investment also rose more than 2.5%. Still, business sentiment among Korean manufacturers worsened this month, going down for the first time this year to 79 from 82 in April. A reading below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. The Bank of Korea, which releases the monthly survey, says the slowing Chinese economy and strengthening won soured business sentiment. And with the sentiment remaining sluggish, experts point out that the data for May and June will decide whether the nation's overall economic trend has turned downward. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
We've been getting a lot of data points which the government and the Bank of Korea here say took hits from the ferry disaster. As we saw in the report just now, take for instance the Consumer Sentiment Index for the month of May dropping to the lowest level in 8 months. But it looks like the mournful mood did not exactly affect spending overseas. Koreans spent nearly $1.7 billion abroad in April, marking a monthly record high and a jump of 24.7% on year. Experts say although large group trips such as school excursions have been canceled since the ferry disaster, smaller groups are opening up their wallets for international travel, enjoying the strong Korean won as well as low-cost carriers. We now take you to Korea's southern port city of Busan, where the annual motor show opened to the public this Friday. A car is up for grabs every day during the show, of course, but there's more to take away as for what to expect for the future of this industry. Song Ji-sun gives us a preview.
The bustling city of Busan is now the go-to market for domestic and foreign automakers alike. 1 out of every 5 cars on the road in this port city is imported, the highest rate in the country, representing the purchasing power of Korea's second biggest city. That's just one of the reasons more and more automakers are choosing the Busan International Motor Show to unveil their latest models. Hyundai Motor pulled the curtain back on its AG for the first time, a luxury sedan developed to cater to those with a budget between $30,000 to $50,000 US. Hyundai also unveiled a diesel version of its best-selling Grandeur model to provide customers with more options.
We felt the need to diversify our luxury lineup to retain our customers. We found drivers who opt for larger diesel models are demanding efficiency and practicality. Models made by German automakers are popular, so we launched the first diesel in our luxury lineup.
Vehicles powered by greener engines are worth keeping an eye on. Among the more than 200 cars exhibited here at Bexco, a noticeable trend emerges in the rising number of hybrid and electric cars aimed at lowering carbon emissions. Developing and supporting low-carbon vehicles was one of the major issues discussed during the OECD International Transport Forum held in Leipzig, Germany last week, but the lack of infrastructure is still a concern. Automakers are doing their best to address those worries.
The electricity bill is only $30 when driving 1,500 kilometers per month. We are also equipping charging facilities at parking lots in large supermarket chains, so drivers can charge their cars with much less fuss.
Visitors can test drive some of these oil-free vehicles at the expo, and one automobile is given away each day to a lucky visitor. 송지선, Arirang News, Busan.
Beauty and cosmetic products are no longer solely the preserve of women. The male skin care market is booming, and it's Asian men who are spending the most. Data by market research firm Euromonitor shows the Asia-Pacific region took up 64% of the $3.3 billion market last year. China had the largest share, with Korea sitting in second place at $635 million. When it comes to per-person spending, Korea easily topped the list. Korean men spent just over $25 on skincare last year, which is triple that of Danish men, who came in a second on the list. The Wall Street Journal said Korea's male celebrities' endorsements of these products are helping this trend. And heads up to all of you fathers of daughters out there. If you tell your little girl that she can grow up to be anything she wants to be, you might want to pick up the vacuum and wash the dishes a little more often. A new study by the University of British Columbia found that daughters closely watch how their parents share household chores, and the way in which they do plays a crucial role in shaping how girls view the world. When a father performs a greater share of traditionally female household chores, his daughter is less likely to say she wants to pursue a non-traditional female career. Even in cases where both parents endorse gender equality outwardly, the father's share of the housework was seen as the biggest factor. The results of the study are published in the U.S.-based Psychological Science magazine.
Now it's time for In the Press, where we look at some of the issues that have captured the attention of the domestic media this week.
We go over now to our Yulian for more.
Good evening and happy Friday. Let's dive straight into 동아일보 and take a look at the story that made one of its front pages. Now, headline over here reads, Korea's financial services isolated a look overseas. It's pointing out that Korea's financial market is falling behind compared to other Asian countries because it has been overly dependent on its domestic market. Now, Professor Masahiro Kawai at University of Tokyo here said that Korea should utilize its high current account surplus and invest in countries like Vietnam and Indonesia, regions in the process of rapid urbanization. He also recommended for the European model for Asia to minimize the effects of possible economic crisis in the future. Now, as you may remember, a lot of blame for the deaths of the Seoul ferry disaster were directed at the failure to rescue passengers during the so-called golden time. And there has been a string of deadly fire accidents here in Korea in recent days, and the dailies are putting the focus on the golden time of those accidents as well. Now, the headline here from the 중앙일보 reads, golden time for accidents, 5 minutes. Now, and the map below shows how long it takes on average for fire trucks to arrive at the site of the accident by different regions. Now, the scattered parts in green are aside from the regions from green, the rest in orange and red are where the fire trucks were unable to arrive during the golden time to put out the fire, showing once again how slow Korea's emergency response system is. Now, shifting gears, competition is heating up between Samsung, Apple, and Google, not in the mobile phone market, but in the smart home market. Now, let's take a look at this business section story from 조선일보, and the headline reads, a smart home race, neck-and-neck race between Samsung, Google, and Apple. Now, a smart home is defined here in the paper as technology that can be used to control and monitor home appliances. Now, zooming in closer to this chart right over here, we can see that the article notes that Apple has an advantage since it only has a single mobile phone model, its iPhone, which means it only has to worry about integrating the iPhone into the smart home system. Now, different story for Samsung, which has a wide range of different models, but still the paper notes Samsung holds the top place in terms of home appliances such as TVs and refrigerators, which does give it an advantage. Now, Google has acquired Nest, a hardware company, to focus on building a hardware network to also jump into the smart home market. Now, moving on, the Chungang business paper over here also highlights another sector where competition is growing fierce. The headline over here reads, Apple and Samsung's next battlefield, this time music streaming. Now, Apple purchased the headphone maker Beats as well as the subscription music streaming service this week. And Samsung had already launched a streaming service, Milk Music, earlier in March this year. And the move into the streaming market is quite understandable as it is growing rapidly, rounding up revenue worth of $1 billion seen by the graph over here. Now, that does it for this week's look at the stories in the Korean press.
Pakistan's leader is speaking out against the murder of a young woman who was stoned in broad daylight by her family after saying no to an arranged marriage.
With more on that story, we go to Paul Yi at the News Center. Paul, this brutal and shocking killing has sparked outrage all over the world. Can you tell us more about the victim?
Well, her name was Farzaneh Iqbal. She was 25 years old, and her only crime was marrying the man she loved. According to police, Farzaneh and her husband was confronted by her family after leaving a courthouse on Tuesday in the northeastern city of Lahore. She was then stoned and beaten to death by relatives who had disowned her for rejecting an arranged marriage with a cousin. Farzaneh was reportedly 3 months pregnant when she was attacked. Her husband, Mohammed Iqbal, has accused police officers of standing idly by during the 15 minutes his wife was being killed. Authorities have detained the father, but the remaining 19 suspects have disappeared. On Thursday, protesters took to the streets in the capital, Islamabad, to condemn the so-called honor killing.
We need to stop this barbarism, and I think it's government responsibility to arrest all those people, and it's shameful that only one person got arrested and the rest, all of them who attacked her, just they ran away from the spot.
Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has called the killing totally unacceptable and ordered the Chief Minister of Punjab province to take immediate action. According to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, there were more than 800 such honor killings in the country last year. However, experts say the true figure is likely much higher since many cases are never reported. Turning now to Washington, where the political rumor mill has been running wild this week, and all because of a single tweet. Sandra Westfall of the Washington bureau chief of People's Magazine had interviewed Hillary Clinton at her Washington home on Thursday. Westphal then posted a photo of her and the former First Lady with a message alluding to a meeting with President Obama at the White House. The tweet was promptly taken down, but not before it was sent out to millions of her followers. Upon hearing the news, many asked for an official response from the presidential office. The White House later confirmed President Obama had enjoyed an informal private lunch with Secretary Clinton and nothing more. Hillary Clinton has not officially declared any intention of running in the 2016 presidential election, but many analysts say she would be a top candidate for the Democratic Party if she decides to run. And moving on to some technology news, according to an exclusive from Forbes magazine, Microsoft will be the latest tech giant to jump into the wearables market. The Redmond-based company is reportedly developing a smartwatch that's loaded with sensors which will measure your heart rate and other biometrics. But one of the biggest revelations is that it will be cross-platform capable. This means you'll be able to sync with Apple's iPhones, Google's Android smartphones, and of course Windows Mobile 8 phones. Forbes added that the Microsoft smartwatch could be released as early as this summer. If confirmed, they're expected to face a wave of tough competition. Samsung Electronics currently holds more than 70% of the global smartwatch market and is already selling their second generation of wearable devices. LG Electronics and Motorola are also set to launch their new smartwatches later this year. The billionaire technology entrepreneur Elon Musk has unveiled a next-generation spaceship that he says will change the way how astronauts travel to the stars. The founder of Space Exploration Technologies, or SpaceX, showed off an upgraded version of their Dragon spacecraft at the company's California headquarters on Thursday. Despite already securing a $1.6 billion contract from NASA to resupply the International Space Station, the CEO of SpaceX said they're just getting started.
Long term, we really want to get to the point where there can be thousands of space flights a year, and ultimately where we can have a base on the moon and a base on Mars and become a multi-planet species and a true space-ranked civilization.
The U.S. currently pays Russia more than $60 million for a single round trip to the ISS. However, Elon Musk says his company can do that same job for $20 million or less. That wraps up our look at international headlines making stories around the world. I'll see you back here next week.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. The South Korea national football team said their final goodbyes at Incheon International Airport before stepping off Korean soil for the last time until the end of the World Cup. Manager Hong Myung-bo and his men will complete their final training camp in Miami, Florida, before heading to Brazil for the big tournament. Hong says the team will work on conditioning, agility, and power, and then play in their final tune-up match against Ghana on June 9th. That gives South Korea ample time to make adjustments, rest, and acclimate to Brazil's climate ahead of their first group stage match against Russia on June 17th. And moving on to basketball, the Korean Basketball League always looks for fresh overseas talents. And for this year's tryouts, 558 players have registered. The list will be whittled down after being reviewed by the 10 KBL teams, and the final tryouts will be held in Las Vegas, Nevada for 2 days from July 21st. And speaking of foreign talent, Aaron Haynes is heading into his 7th season in Korea after re-signing with the SK Knights for a 3rd year. Meanwhile, ex-Microsoft chief executive Steve Ballmer has agreed to buy the Los Angeles Clippers for a record $2 billion pending approval by the NBA. Ballmer signed a binding agreement with the Sterling Family Trust led by Shelley Sterling, but her estranged husband and co-owner Donald Sterling, as well as 3/4 of the 30 NBA team owners, must sign off on the deal for it to be finalized. And heading to the major leagues, Texas Rangers leadoff man Chu Shin-soo bounced back after 2 hitless games to lead his team to a victory over the Minnesota Twins. He got 2 hits, one of which was a bases-loaded double for 3 RBIs in the 5-4 win, improving his average to .297. Meanwhile, Blue Jays' Edwin Encarnacion slammed 2 long balls to tie Mickey Mantle's record for the most American League home runs in the month of May at 16. And that brings us to Friday's top KBO matchup. The Tucson Bears hosted the Lotte Giants in Chamshir. Now that takes us to the second inning. Tusan's Lee Won-seok and also Chung Soo-bin bring 2 home. It's 2-0 Bears. Then we fly to the fourth. Lotte's Luis Jimenez. He belts a solo shot to cut the lead to 1. But Tusan adds 2 in the fifth, started by Kim Hyun-soo's RBI single. It's 4-1 Bears. They add more insurance in the 8th inning, and they go on to win this one 6-1. And looking at the other games, we have Nexon beating LG 11-5, NC wins over Kia 8-6, and finally SK takes down Hanwha 6-1. Well, that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
It was a hot summer-like day, and today's daytime high in Seoul broke a 21-year-old record.
Right, and for more, we turn things over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Happy Friday, guys. Earlier today, Seoul will jump to 31.8 degrees, which is more like mid-July weather. Well, as for the weekend, it is going to be a scorcher. The sunny summer conditions will last over the next few days, but nationwide rain awaits us on Tuesday. Now, very high UV levels should extend to most parts of the country, as you can see, so please make sure to apply sunscreen and drink plenty of water. Well, at the moment, we are seeing absolutely clear skies across the map due to a high pressure system from Japan. Some relief that finest levels have finally dropped to the normal range after 5 days. However, levels may rise slightly from time to time. Moving on to Saturday's readings, Seoul hits 32 degrees. Daegu and Gwangju continue to reach the mid-30s. Taking a look at other places, Jeju tops out at 28 degrees, while Dokdo and Kumgang peak at 20 and 26. Well, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll be back with more after midnight.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that does it for this edition of Primetime News. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you back here on Monday. Good night.